to this point, it has not worked out. There's so many things the young quarterbacks have to do to have success in the NFL, and it's hard when you just don't have the opportunity to stack those reps.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to lose. It's frustrating to be up here and say the same things every single week. And
I talked about JJ McCarthy a week ago. We covered the 9 alter ego, the cringe, the whole thing. And at the time I said, look, things are bad, but maybe it gets better. Maybe the kid figures it out. Well, I'm here to tell you that it did not get better. Since we last talked, the Minnesota Vikings, who, by the way, came into this season with Super Bowl expectations, well, they're currently crumbling from within. They're now 4-7 on the season. They've lost 3 straight games. JJ McCarthy just got placed in the concussion protocol after getting absolutely demolished by the Packers. And the stats that have come out about his play, they're not just bad, they're historically bad. Like, we're talking about one of the worst quarterbacks in NFL history bad. And what sucks about this situation is the Vikings had every chance to prevent this disaster. They had Sam Darnold on the roster last year, and he led them to 14 wins and a Pro Bowl selection. Sure, I don't blame fans for thinking that it was Kevin O'Connell, because Sam Darnold was a journeyman quarterback and a former draft bust. They also had Daniel Jones chilling on the practice squad. They literally had conversations with Aaron Rodgers about coming to Minnesota, and they said no to all of them. They bet everything on JJ McCarthy, and right now, that bet is looking like a complete disaster. So let's get into exactly how bad things have gotten, why the Vikings are now being called crazy by anonymous league executives, and what's probably going to happen next, because spoiler alert, it is not looking good for JJ McCarthy. So mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I gotta start with a horrific statistic that will terrify all Minnesota Vikings fans. According to True Media, JJ McCarthy now ranks 851st out of 852 qualified passers in EPA per dropback since 2000. EPA per dropback, for those who don't know, basically measures how many points a quarterback is expected to add every time he drops back to pass. The higher the number, the better, and the lower the number, the worse. And JJ McCarthy's number is so low that there's only one quarterback in the past 25 years who has been worse. And that quarterback is Jamarcus Russell. The same Jamarcus Russell who is widely considered the biggest draft bust in NFL history. The same Jamarcus Russell who was the first overall pick in 2007 and was out of the league by 2010. The same Jamarcus Russell who the Raiders gave over $39 million to and got basically nothing in return. That's the only guy that JJ McCarthy is beating right now. And look, I know some people are going to say, but Mike, JJ McCarthy has barely played so far. It's a small sample size. And you're right. McCarthy has only started 6 games, but the problem is, in those 6 games, he's shown almost no improvement. In fact, he might be getting worse. ESPN's Kevin Seifert pointed out that the only Vikings quarterback in the last 30 years to throw multiple interceptions in 3 straight games was Christian Ponder back in 2012. And we all know how Christian Ponder turned out. Speaking of those comparisons, the numbers through 6 starts are eerily similar. Ponder was 1-5 with a 56.3% completion percentage, 1,423 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. McCarthy is 2-4 with a 54.1% completion percentage, 929 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. He's actually got fewer touchdowns and more interceptions than Ponder did at this point. Let that sink in for a second. Since 2010, only 3 first-round quarterbacks have had a passer rating under 65 in their first 6 starts. The first is JJ McCarthy at 57.9. The second is Blaine Gabbert at 60.3. The third is Zach Wilson at 63.5. That's the company JJ McCarthy is keeping right now. Not Patrick Mahomes, not Josh Allen, Blaine Gabbert, and Zach Wilson. So the most recent game against the Packers was pretty much rock bottom. And believe me, I really wanted the Vikings to win this game as a Dallas Cowboy fan because, well, that would just mean that the Packers draft pick in the Micah Parsons trade would be much more valuable for my favorite team. But the Vikings got embarrassed. They lost 23-6 at Lambeau Field. And McCarthy, bro, this guy was terrible. I mean, he completed 12 of 19 passes for just 87 yards with no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That's a passer rating of 34.2. You know what the passer rating of a quarterback would be if a quarterback just spiked the ball into the ground every single play? 39.6. JJ McCarthy's passer rating was lower than just throwing the ball into the dirt. The first half wasn't even that bad. McCarthy went 7 for 11 for 62 yards. But the Vikings knew they couldn't trust him to throw, so McConnell called 15 runs and only 12 passes. They were trying to hide him. Then the second half happened. A special teams mistake put them in an 11-point hole. And suddenly JJ McCarthy had to actually throw the ball to win. And that's where he completely fell apart. Then after the game, McCarthy reported concussion symptoms on the flight back home, and now he's in concussion protocol and is expected to miss this week's game against the Seahawks. Oh, by the way, he's now missed 23 of 29 possible games in his career due to injury. The guy can't stay on the field. And this is where the story gets really painful for Vikings fans, because the organization didn't have to do this. They have 3 legitimate veteran quarterbacks that they could have kept or signed, and they said no to all of them. Let's start with Sam Darnold. This guy went 14-3 last year with the Vikings, threw 35 touchdowns, and made the Pro Bowl. Yeah, he struggled in the last 2 games of the season, including that playoff loss, but overall, he was incredible in Kevin O'Connell's system. The Vikings could have kept him. They could have at least franchise tagged him in case JJ McCarthy turned out to be but they chose not to, and Darnold signed with the Seattle Seahawks for 3 years and $100.5 million. So how's Darnold doing right now? Oh, he only has 2,785 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and a 69.5 completion percentage through 11 games. He just led the Seattle Seahawks to an 8-3 record, and guess who the Vikings play this Sunday? The Seattle Seahawks. So JJ McCarthy, who's in concussion protocol, is going to watch his undrafted rookie backup face off against the guy that the Vikings let walk away. You can't make this stuff up. But Darnold wasn't the only option they passed on. There's 2 more. Daniel Jones spent the end of the 2024 season on Minnesota's practice squad after the Giants released him, and he wanted to come back. The Vikings offered him significant money, but they told him he wasn't going to be the starter. The job belonged to JJ McCarthy, so Daniel Jones went somewhere where he could compete for the starting job, the Indianapolis Colts, and he won that competition. And now, Jones is having a solid season with the Colts, ranking 7th in passing yards and 9th in passing touchdowns. He looks like a completely different player. And then there's Aaron Rodgers. The Vikings had actual conversations with the 4-time MVP about joining Minnesota. This would have been the ultimate revenge tour for Rodgers and would have just been hilarious because he would have directly followed Brett Favre's career trajectory if this happened. But the Vikings said no. They told Rodgers they believed in McCarthy, so Rodgers went to the Steelers instead. And he currently has 19 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions and has completed 66.4% of his passes. So if you were following, the Minnesota Vikings had a Pro Bowl quarterback who won 14 games in their system. They had a former first-round pick who wanted to compete for a job. They had a 4-time MVP who wanted to come to Minnesota, and they said no to all 3 because they believed in JJ McCarthy. One anonymous executive told The Athletic that it was absolutely crazy what the Vikings did, and honestly, he's right. So this week, Diana Rossini from The Athletic dropped a massive column about the state of the league, and the Vikings section was absolutely brutal. She wrote about how everyone around the league is asking the same question: what happened to the Minnesota Vikings? And it's not just people outside the building asking that. According to Rossini, inside the state of Minnesota, inside the building, inside that locker room, there are some wondering how different this season might look with better quarterback play. That's a huge deal. That means even people within the organization are questioning the decision to go with McCarthy. Rossini laid out the entire situation. The Vikings took a massive and costly swing this offseason, spending more than any NFC team. They walked away from a 14-game winner in Sam Darnold. They lost Daniel Jones to the Colts. They passed on a 4-time MVP in Aaron Rodgers. From everything she gathered, money wasn't the hangup in any of those situations. It was ultimately all about betting on JJ McCarthy. And here's the really interesting part. Rossini reported there were differences in opinion about the quarterbacks inside the building, with some in the organization wanting to retain Darnold, but they decided collectively to back the 22-year-old McCarthy, fresh off of a major knee injury, and now that decision is blowing up in their faces. Look at what Tom Pelissero said about the situation on The Rich Eisen Show.
To this point, it has not worked out. There's so many things the young quarterbacks have to do to have success in the NFL, and it's hard when you just don't have the opportunity to stack those reps. But it's not as if this was a failure. It's more, this has been really, really challenging.
And we ought to talk about Justin Jefferson because this situation is absolutely killing the best receiver in football. Jefferson's stats are down across the board with JJ McCarthy as the quarterback. In 5 games McCarthy has started, Jefferson has yardage totals of 44, 81, 47, 37, and 61. Justin Jefferson's only cleared 50 yards in 2 of McCarthy's starts. And believe me, I'm feeling this the most because JJ McCarthy single-handedly tanked my fantasy football season because I drafted Justin Jefferson. Right? Remember, this is a guy who signed a contract worth $35 million per season. He's in the prime of his career, and he's stuck watching passes sail over his head while his quarterback talks about his alter ego 9. Jefferson entered the season owning the all-time receiving yards per game record at 96.5 yards. It's now dropped to 94 yards per game because JJ McCarthy is single-handedly tanking his numbers. After the Packers lost, Jefferson didn't hide his frustration.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to lose. You know, it's frustrating to be up here and say the same things every single week and expecting for something to change the following week, and you know, we're still in the same spot. So, you know, I hate to lose. I hate to be in, you know, this type of situation. I hate feeling the way we feel. I hate coming in this locker room, seeing the down faces, and like I said, we just gotta fix it and turn it around.
And you can see it on the field too. Cameras caught Jefferson on the sideline visibly upset, trying to take off his helmet in frustration as McCarthy continued to struggle. It wasn't just one play, it was the whole game. It was the whole season, really. To Jefferson's credit, he's been publicly supportive of McCarthy. He keeps saying the right things. He's not throwing his quarterback under the bus, but you can see the frustration building. Vikings offensive coordinator Wes Phillips said Jefferson has never once shied away despite the circumstances. But how long can you ask one of the best players in the NFL to be patient while his prime years are wasted? So the Vikings have one glimmer of hope, and it's a really absurd glimmer of hope. With McCarthy in concussion protocol, the Vikings are likely turning to undrafted rookie Max Brosmer for this week's game against the Seahawks. And honestly, some Vikings fans are actually excited about this, which tells you everything you need to know about how McCarthy's been playing. Brosmer is a 24-year-old who played his college ball at New Hampshire and then Minnesota. He went undrafted in April, but Kevin O'Connell has been impressed with him since watching him throw at the Gophers Pro Day. In the preseason finale against the Titans, Brosmer completed 15 of 23 passes for 161 yards and a touchdown. And here's the thing that's wild. If Brosmer plays well against the Seahawks, it puts the Vikings in an incredibly awkward position. Albert Breer said that the Vikings want to gather as much information as possible on McCarthy before making a decision about the 2026 season. If your undrafted rookie backup comes in and plays better than your first round pick, what do you do then? The Brock Purdy comparisons are already flying around. Mr. Irrelevant comes in, outplays the highly touted guy, and takes the job. Could it happen in Minnesota? Right now, after watching McCarthy struggle for 6 games, a lot of Vikings fans wouldn't mind him folding out. And given the talent on this Minnesota Vikings roster, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest. How hard is it just to throw bombs to Justin Jefferson? Honestly, it can't be that difficult. So where do the Vikings go from here? According to ESPN's Dan Graziano, the Vikings having a different starting quarterback in 2026 is not an overreaction. He wrote that at the very least, the Vikings will want to bring in a veteran quarterback to compete with McCarthy next year, similar to what the Colts did with Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. Think about that. The Vikings might follow the blueprint of bringing in Daniel Jones, the same guy they let walk away last offseason, to compete with JJ McCarthy. The irony is almost too perfect, but I don't see the Colts letting Daniel Jones leave. There's even speculation that Aaron Rodgers could be back in play for 2026, the same Aaron Rodgers they passed on last year. If Rodgers decides to keep playing and the Vikings come calling, what does that say about the McCarthy experiment? The reality is, the Vikings built the NFL's most expensive roster at $350 million for 2025. They brought in Pro Bowl defenders, they signed veterans everywhere, and all of that investment is being wasted while a quarterback who clearly needed more time to develop is getting thrown to the wolves. Rossini quoted Kevin O'Connell from back in September, where he talked about how NFL teams cycle through young quarterbacks too quickly and often have only themselves to blame. Now O'Connell is staring at that exact same scenario in real time. The waves are getting taller by the week, and nobody knows if McCarthy can learn to swim before the ship sinks. Look, JJ McCarthy might still figure it out. He's only 22 years old. He's got talent, but right now, in this moment, he's playing worse than almost every quarterback we've seen in the past 25 years. The only guy below him is Jamarcus Russell. His completion percentage is dead last among qualified starters. He leads the league in bad throw percentage, and the worst part is, he's doing all of this on a team that was built to win right now. The JJ McCarthy situation didn't just get worse, it got historically bad. And honestly, I'm not sure how the Vikings can fix it. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think the Vikings should do? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.